Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent podcast. Today, I'm sitting with Nick Bognar. Nick is a therapist in Pasadena, California, who specializes in men's issues and codependence. Nick's favorite thing in the world is helping clients learn how to set boundaries. In his spare time, Nick acts in various film projects under the stage name Ryan Gosling. His first interview on the podcast, which was titled Codependency as a Superpower, aired in April of 2021, which I will put a link to in the show note for later. So, Nick, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's been too long. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes. So, when you were first on, we did hear about your definition of codependency, which was taking care of other people until it kills you. Do you want to expand on that definition? Has your conceptualization of codependency changed? Say more.
Certainly. Well, I got to say, yeah, of course, as we know, it's a big behavioral set. It's a big belief set that comes. And so it's certainly more multifarious than just taking care of people until it kills you. But I found that a lot of times the taking care of people pathologically is what ends up sending people into therapy in misery, wondering why the person hasn't reciprocated their care, wondering why the world isn't obeying the deal that they made the world a part of without the world knowing about it. And so I find it's a pretty elegant, short way to describe, I think, what it feels like for a lot of people who are really deep in their codependence.
Mm-hmm. Right. I love that. So either non-reciprocated care with another person, or I love the world. The world is not treating me the way I'm treating the world, and I'm miserable.
Right. And it's sad. Do you know what I mean? And it comes from a really nice place, you know, on some level, in the most positive sense, a lot of these people are being the change they want to see in the world. But where it really falls apart is the notion that the world didn't consent to this agreement. And so the codependent is constantly in a place to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you shared about a previous work experience and a miserable job that thankfully got you into therapy. And yeah, becoming a therapist. Do you have another codependent experience from your own life that you can share with us?
Another all right, I want to take a moment to think about this, because there's millions and millions, but what would be a good one to highlight? I'll tell you. So I've got it. So one of my other careers was waiting tables, and I did that for years, did it all the way through grad school. And my experience with waiting tables was that it is pretty easy. And I don't mean that it's not rigorous, but I mean, I was good at it and I could manage it. And, you know, the actual process of doing it wasn't particularly challenging once I got the hang of it. However, one of the things that waiting tables teaches you to do is to anticipate people's needs constantly, which is right in the wheelhouse of a codependent, right? If you're codependent, you're just constantly tracking people for what they might want. And so you get to a place where you're constantly, from the moment somebody walks in, trying to anticipate their needs, which is fine if you know what you're doing and you have boundaries around it. But for me, a lot of the experience was then being really angry if I did my best to meet somebody's needs and then they still acted like an asshole, or if I I did my best to know this thing that they needed, and then they, gave me a shitty tip, right? And I don't blame anybody for getting mad over a shitty tip. It's still an irritating thing. But
Yeah.
I think a part of my pain came from the expectation that other people would play along with the rules that I felt were appropriate.
Right.
And waiting tables really enhance those expectations, because you're going to be right enough times to think that this is a totally reliable way of doing things. So there's another codependent story. All my servers out there, I feel you. It is a hard job. It is psychologically wearying.
Yeah. So I'm botching this, but your misery came from the expectations that people would like play along with this rule that you had, which is what was the rule?
The rule is I'm going to take care of everything that you need, and so then you're going to take care of all my needs, right? And again, it can be more nuanced than that. It can be like, look, I'm going to show up exactly the way I should show up here. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to get you everything you want. I'm going to know what you want before you want it. And then in return, you're going to give me a good tip, right? And again, I'm a good tipper, and everyone out there, you should be a good tipper if you're not. And it's important. But my misery didn't necessarily come from the fact that they left a shitty tip, although that sucks. It came from the feeling of betrayal and resentment I had, that I expected somebody else to, obey this rule that to me was compulsory, and it should be compulsory. Right. But there's so much pain in expecting people to believe a certain way and then feeling personally betrayed when they don't.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of a specific guest or like customer that comes to mind? Like a big party or even like a regular, like, yeah, does a specific example come to mind?
A lot of them come to mind, but one that I think about in particular was this this couple that used to come in, and they loved to come in, and they felt like they owned the place, and they were just so entitled, right? And now that have a distance from it, I understand sort of where that comes from, and I understand that I shouldn't take that personally. But week after week, they would just run me ragged, and they just thought I was their best friend. That was another frustration, was that like they really wanted this level of closeness with me as a server that I didn't feel like they had earned. And then every week, this tip would just be horrendous. And so I felt like I was in a position where I can't complain about it. I can't have an attitude about it. I have to meet all their needs. I have to be the guy in that moment. And they kept not playing ball. And it just made me fucking crazy. Can I swear?
Yeah.
It just made me fucking crazy after a while that they would act this way. And again, I think that's the actual really hard part about waiting tables, is having to feel so close in a way to somebody, like really watching them, really trying to meet their needs, really trying to take care of them, and then often feeling rebuffed or under reciprocated for reasons that usually have nothing to do with you.
Yeah. I really appreciate your language, the betrayal, because it's like,
right.
Like, I don't know what movie I'm in from the 1920s, but yeah, just
like a pearl clutching. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's this unspoken contract, right, with my ex-boyfriends. Some friends thankfully have persevered, but yeah, ex-friends, ex-bosses, ex-customers, and just really implicitly demanding, yeah, you need to play ball. I'm gonna meet all your needs, but there needs to be some reciprocity. And if there's not, yeah, betrayal, disappointment.
And if there's not reciprocity, you're really doing something wrong. Or beneath that, or I'm not lovable enough, or I'm not good enough, right? I mean, I think that's part of it too, is that there's so much really complicated calculus that goes on in the mind of a codependent person that we're not even aware of. And it's so interesting because we normalize it and we say, like, this is just how you are. You just have to be this way. You just do this. Why are these people not doing this? And confusing something that is very meaningful and deep and important to us as being a social norm.
Right. When it's not.
When it's not, or if it is, it might not be a healthy social norm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, let's focus today. In preparation, we talked about families navigating addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, what are the traits and characteristics of a codependent in these families? And yeah, if we can break it down, because I think we do hear a lot about the codependent's interaction with the addict, but also like more generally, like with like a family, with other family members as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as we know, everybody has a different role in their family, right? Everybody has a different place that they fit in and how they interlock with each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think one big one is keeping secrets. I think keeping secrets is something that plays prominently into families with addicts in them. And sometimes that means keeping secrets from each other. And sometimes that means them keeping secrets from the world. What's an example? So, we're not going to talk about dad's drinking. Don't tell the teacher about dad's drinking. It's just going to make problems. Right. I often find that in families, whether they have an addict in them or not, I often tell clients about the tea kettle analogy, which is like the tea kettle, you put it on a stove and you heat it, and eventually the water boils on the inside and it screams. And I feel like there's one member of the family often who is the spout of the tea kettle. There's like, and that's usually the IP, right? The identified patient in family therapy. And it's the one person who's screaming, and everybody else represents the overheated part of the tea kettle that's just holding this boiling water in. So that's another thing that I see. And then I think a lot of times we make the screaming tea kettle person into the problem, so to speak, instead of understanding, as astute family therapists do, that in fact there's probably something going on in the entire system that's heating it up in that way. So that would be another one.
And would you say, Nick, really quick, that the spout, right, the identified patient, the member in the family who tends to be acting out externally, right, explicitly, like we can point to their behavior,
right?
Do they tend, in families like dealing with addiction, do they tend to be the addict, or can it also be like, maybe dad's a drunk and then one of the siblings is a troublemaker and then we all focus on them?
Yeah, I think it tends to be the sibling more often. I think, in fact, everybody's really trying to suppress the effect of the addiction. I think everybody's really trying to keep that smooth. And then what happens is you have, maybe one kid who's at school biting another kid. And it's because he doesn't have the maturity and really the support to process the anger that he feels inside, or the sadness or the fear. And so as a result, he acts out. And I think that everybody says that kid has a problem, and that kid does have a problem, but I don't think the problem is that he's a bad kid. It's really that he is dealing with some real stress at home and everyone else is tamping it down, and this kid can't handle it anymore. And so he explodes.
Right. There's that saying like it's a symptom of a deeper problem. So it's almost like the child's behavior is a symptom of this deeper, just addicted family chaos.
Right. And that's the thing. And that's the amazing thing, is that in most families with addicts, the chaos, unless the addiction is really advanced, the chaos is all under the surface. It's a secret. You know what I mean? We have a story that we've made up about us that's normalizing instead of talking about our problems. And, in most healthier family systems, on some level, people can talk about that and they can make sense out of it and squabble over it. But the reason the pressure builds up and the reason that kid acts out so much is because the rest of the family is just keeping the waters so smooth on top, despite all of the action underneath.
Right. So what does a codependent look like in these families with the addict and with, the troublemaker and with other members in the family?
Well, they can do a lot of different, they can serve a lot of different roles. Some of them are the caretaker. So, in fact, a lot of them are the caretaker. And I'd venture to say that almost all codependents really fall hard into that role of the caretaker, whether it's the person that keeps the trains running on time, whether it's the person that, you know, I'm going to make a few things up, puts dad to bed when he's wasted. The person that, you know, the oldest kid that makes the lunches for all the other kids because mom is not waking up to help with that. What are some other things? You know, just basically anything that they sort of fill in the blanks to help the needs get met that aren't there. But again, it's not an ask for help situation. It's a we have to preserve our notion of peace. We have to preserve our notion of normalcy.
And I can understand why, but like, yeah, what are your thoughts on like why is there implicit need to preserve our notion of peace? Like, what type of contract did we all agree to?
Well, I mean, you know, part of it is what happens if we show that we're not peaceful? What happens if we show that we're in pain or that we're sick or that we're dysfunctional? Like, what happens? And I mean, I'll ask you, what happens if people see that?
I mean, my mind goes to like gossip and rumors.
Okay.
So our reputation as a family is doubted. Maybe some type of authority comes into contact with the family.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe like some fear of separation. Like if there's enough conflict, maybe mom or dad will leave. So definitely don't want that. Well, long term, it could be good, but I don't know that right now.
But nobody craves that, right? Nobody's hoping that happens, right? Yeah, I mean, I think for the codependent, these are all real. And then I think that because the thing is that codependent families are all centered around the addict, right? Remember that the addict is the dependent and the other members of the family are the codependents. That's why we have that term, even though it's confusing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that what it's centered around it's very, very hard is if somebody finds out we're sick, then we're going to have to deal with it. And so I think we're all protecting that person's addiction because that person would do anything not to have to confront it, would do anything not to have to change it. You know, maybe everybody's really scared of it. And so the result is that person protects that addiction tooth and nail, right? They normalize it, they rationalize it, you know, whatever they need to do to keep themselves in their addiction, right? And then everybody else also protects that secret. Everybody else also protects that person's addiction and behavior.
Right. And going back to your metaphor of this tea kettle, right? Like if I had tea on right now and it was, you know, the spout was like, or whatever the spout noise is, I'd be like, Nick, I'm so sorry. Like, this is a really annoying sound. I have to go take care of this immediately. However, in families, I would argue that they can go for generations, even a whole lifetime with an addict without actually moving the tea from the heat.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's really a situation of who sort of boils first, you know. Everybody else in the family is maintaining. And in a lot of instances, that's because that's how we know how to be, right? I mean, it's no secret that people who grow up in environments with addiction and codependence gravitate towards, you know, partners who are addicted and or codependent. I mean, it's how we learn how to be. The way that we learn how to be in our families as kids is a role that we will often seek out as adults. Right. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this a million times, right? Like, and it's, I mean, to the point where I think people think it's cliche, but it's cliche because it happens all of the time, which is like, yeah, my parent was an alcoholic. And I started dating alcoholics. And why is that? It's not because you love, you know, the idea of being addicted to alcohol. It's because you know what an alcoholic needs. You know where you fit with an alcoholic. You know how to be in relation with somebody. If you have somebody that doesn't need you to care for them in that way, then you don't know what to do. You don't know where you fit. You don't know how to provide love for this person, right? And so it takes real work to sort of break that cycle. And I forgot what the original question was. Sorry, I meandered off onto a road, but
No, yeah, I appreciate that. And that's a good segue to the next question. So, setting boundaries. Boundaries. Set boundaries, right? It's often discussed in families navigating addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I can assume why. But for you and in your clinical work, why do you think setting boundaries is emphasized and so important in these situations?
Well, an enormous part of what affects codependent people negatively is the overstepping of these boundaries or the failure in self-care, right? So busy caring for somebody else that you neglect your own self-care. And so teaching people to set boundaries really allows them or encourages them to have a real fence around the amount of care that they're willing to provide for other people. And then also, hopefully, to turn inward and to care for themselves. So that's really, 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 really important. And the boundarylessness is a habit that really has to be broken in order for people to heal from codependence.
Right. Boundarylessness. What does boundarylessness look like, feel like, sound like, smell like?
Yeah. So boundarylessness, I'm going to try to attach all the sentences to it. Boundarylessness can take a lot of things. So it can be the thing we talked about where you're just actually really caring for people, like anticipating their needs, trying to get ahead of anything they might need, trying to just be everything to that person all the time. Another thing is allowing abuse to take place, allowing for somebody to walk all over you or take you for granted or take advantage of you, right? And that can be in the overt ways that we think about, but it can also be in really subtle ways, like just little instances of somebody talking down to you or making you feel bad about yourself, right? Like if we have healthy boundaries, then we say, hey, that's not going to work for me. I don't want to be talked to that way. Right. But folks who struggle to set those boundaries are susceptible to that kind of abuse because they don't know how to say no. And the reason is, if I say no, then I'm violating the agreement that this person and I have, and I'm worthless, unlovable. I have no place in this relationship, and they're going to resent me for it. Right. So people really, instead of understanding what I think hopefully most of us grow to understand, which is that boundaries are actually terrific. Boundaries are how I say to you, this is how I can show up willfully and with a smile for this relationship. To them, it feels like saying, no, fuck you. I'm not going to be a part of this. And you can go to hell, which is scary. I mean, you don't want to say that to your partner. You don't want to say that to your parent. Right. And so that's another thing that boundarylessness, 5 syllables there, looks like.
Right. So being really caring in general, but then it just sounds like it it's just universal, or it just spreads everywhere. So then, you're anticipating needs, and then, it falls into like allowing abuse. Not like saying like your limits for what people can and can't say to you. Or like what they can ask or not ask of you. It's just like, whatever. I'll be whatever you need.
And it's existential to a degree, right? Because each of us has the role that we play, whether we realize it or not. Each of us has the role that we play that gives us meaning in our family of origin, right? And hopefully, if you're a kid, if you're the child in your family of origin, then hopefully the message that you got, if you came from an absolutely perfect and healthy household, is you're precious, you're great the way you are, we take care of you, and then your job is to grow as healthy as you can, right? And that's a healthy job for kids in boundaryless, codependent families learn you have to be the one that makes the family look good. You have to be the one that takes care of dad. You have to be the one, all of these different things that place emphasis on the child expending energy to care for the family instead of the family expending energy to care for the child. And where that gets really tricky is that then it becomes incorporated into our sense of self. And so the result is, who am I if I'm not caring for other people? Who am I if I'm
Right.
not making other people feel loved? Which is why virtually every therapist that I know who is good has some codependence in their life and in their past, because we often grow up wanting to care for people, wanting to make people feel better, wanting to make people healthier. And so hopefully we learn those boundaries and that we help people do it on a professional level. But
Right.
if you have spent your whole life, your whole childhood thinking, I'm the one that takes care of people, and then you're in a situation where somebody doesn't value that, then it's terribly existentially threatening. You know, the same way that if you're the used to being the rich guy and that's how you value yourself, like, hey, I have more money than everybody, that's what makes me cool and lovable and interesting, and then you meet somebody who makes you feel poor, it's devastating. If your
Right.
job has been to be the hottest person in the room since you were a child, everywhere you go, people go, oh, you're so beautiful, you're so beautiful. And then one day, either somebody says something like, wow, you're looking a little long in the face, or somebody else says, wow, that person's the hottest person in the room. Then suddenly it's devastating. Who am I? Why, how do I exist? How do I identify myself? How do I locate myself in this room? And for codependents, that's around being that person that cares for people.
Hmm.
And so they have to have it, or they feel like they're, I mean, not to be silly, but they feel like they're dying a lot.
Right. No, I really appreciate that. You're making me think back, yeah, to people who really didn't care that I cared.
Right.
It's like, what the fuck? Like, I just got you coffee. I did an excellent job on that print job, or, when I was an
Yeah.
administrative assistant, and like, they were just like, oh, thanks. And I was like, you need to fall all over me and, yeah, just like swoon because I'm
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
yeah, they were indifferent. They weren't mean, right? It wasn't cruel, but indifference. I was like, oh hell no.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Because I know if you were the boss and somebody did that for you, you'd be like, oh my God, Philip, thank you so much. This was terrific. You're the best. Like, I know that you would walk the walk. And that's the big painful part of the codependent deal, is like, codependents do walk the walk and then they get destroyed that everybody else doesn't.
Right. Yeah, existential. Yeah, and then I appreciate these examples because I think, yeah, codependence, like we're not in touch with like how much of our identity is focused around caring. And then, yeah, we see people maybe who are more materialistic or superficial, and we're like,
Oh
like
yeah.
this rich guy, his ego. And it's like, where's that? Your ego is huge. It's just you're in a caring competition.
It's
Yeah.
so isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's really like, I mean, talk about self-esteem boost, we value ourselves for that. And so to us, that needs to be something that's important. That needs to be the most important value in the world. And when somebody treats it like it's not, then it's terribly painful, because then where does my self-worth come from? And I love that you sort of did this thing of like, yeah, we get to look down on other people. And I think that that's a natural human response to feeling one down, to feeling low self-esteem, is to look down on other people. It's not healthy, and hopefully we work through it, but like, that's something that we all do and or have done.
Mhm.
And so it's a terrible cycle, because then we keep saying like, well, that's that guy's problem, that's that guy's problem. Well, fuck, man, that guy doesn't seem miserable to me. You seem miserable to me.
Right.
Looking
Right.
inward is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, um, other thoughts on why you think setting boundaries is emphasized and so important in these situations? I mean, what happens if we don't? What happens if a tea kettle just goes off our whole life?
Well, I mean, I think we've all known a person who is that tea kettle going off, who just can't fathom that the world has failed them over and over and over again, who just cannot accept. I mean, we call that ego syntonic in the world of therapy, right? It's the belief that I'm right, everyone else is wrong, and that the world has to change or I can never be happy. And we all know that person. So that's a real example that we've all seen of that. Some people suffer quietly for their whole lives, just in and out of relationships where they just can't ever understand why they can't get their needs met, and where they think it must be them, it must be me, I'm not lovable enough. It must be because, I dated this person, and maybe you and I as therapists or just as friends know that the person is abusive. And to them, it's like, no, I just haven't gotten through to them yet.
Right.
Underlying meaning, it's my fault.
Right.
I would say it's easy to make an example out of the biggest, most sort of flamboyant examples, and that would be the person who's constantly angry all the time. But a lot of people suffer really quietly from this and feel pained and less than and not good enough. And I think that there's far more of those people around us.
Mm-hmm. And what does it look like to set boundaries in families navigating addiction?
It's hard. It's really, really hard because in some instances there's danger involved, right? If you have a family member who is drinking themselves to death and you find that you have to stop providing them with money or shelter, or any of the other ways that sort of codependent families care for their addict, it's terrifying because you worry that the person could die from it, and the person could die from it. People drink themselves to death all the time. The hard part is accepting that no amount of help on your part is going to change that person. And that's tough because at its heart, sorry, codependents, at its heart, codependence is manipulation. It's really trying to find safety and security by manipulating the people and the circumstances around us. And so it's very hard for somebody to accept that if I don't just keep believing if I keep believing in him and I keep giving him money, or I keep, making excuses for him, that he won't turn around. And then in fact, I might actually be getting in the way of that turning around process, if ever it is to take place. And, no one ever wants to stop believing in their partner or their family member or their parent. Nobody ever wants to be the person that says it's on you to change and you might die from this. That's so painful. And yet that's a dance that, people have to go through all the time.
Mm-hmm. No amount of help on your part will save them.
Right. I mean, the saying in the program is help isn't for people who need it, it's for people who want it. And we know that's true, right? People who want to get better have plenty of options. And this is true for codependents too. And people who don't, no matter how bad they may need it, suffer and sometimes die.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing like not extreme, but like if we're looking at a spectrum of boundaries, right? It sounds like on one end, potentially, yeah, it's like this total relinquishment of aid, right?
Yes.
Of help, right? Really, really like dire situation. I'm, bleeding out, or not physically, but like emotionally.
Yeah, emotionally bleeding out is a way to put it. Yeah.
And, maybe I've been in therapy, I'm recognizing these patterns and how my role is not sustainable with this person in my family, with this loved one. And so, yeah, I eventually get to a point, no more money, no more shelter. Yeah, really trying to accept no amount of help I give will save them.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other, what else is on that spectrum on the way to this?
On the way to that, on the way to the sort of the healthy boundaries, or what are we talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I work with people on all the time that I think is so important is I tell them that setting boundaries gets a bad rap, and people think of it as a way to say no to people. But actually, setting boundaries is a way to say yes to people. And I will explain. I think we think that if I set a boundary with you, then I'm going to say, no, you cannot be in my life if you continue to drink. And I hate it and I hate you. And I'm just so mad at you and I'm trying to control you. And I think to people who aren't used to setting boundaries, that's what that sounds like. It sounds like a mean, aggressive, sort of like rigid way of dealing. When in fact, what I'm actually saying is, hey, look, I do love you and I do want to be in a relationship with you. However, in order for us to be in a relationship together, you have to stop drinking, because your drinking is really bad for both of us. And so I'm telling you how I can show up for this relationship with a smile on my face, happy to be there, my full self, right? It's actually just giving you or the partner really clear steps and blueprints for what I need in order to show up for this relationship with a smile on my face.
Right.
And I think deep in our hearts, I mean, although it's really hard for somebody suffering from addiction to hear, deep in our hearts, we actually want to be in relationship with people who are authentic with us. We want to be in relationship with people who will be honest with us, who love and respect us enough to tell us the truth, not people who are going to constantly shift the truth or coddle us or try to protect us from the truth in some way. Right. So let's make an example. So you and I aren't in the same room right now, but let's say that you're thinking to yourself, if Nick comes in here with that breath one more time, I am going to fucking die. It is gross. And it may sound like I'm saying, this is the perfect example, but if you said, Nick, brush your teeth next time you come in here, that's you setting a boundary, right? Like, and it may seem like it may feel like you're being a jerk. And certainly there's more delicate ways to put it. But the truth is what you're saying is, look, I like you and I want us to make this podcast together and I want us to hang out. And this is what I need in order for that to really work for me.
Right.
So it's just a way to say yes to people and to give people the information that they need in order for you to be able to show up fully in the relationship.
Right. So it seems like I'm saying, right, if you come in with this breath, I'm saying no. But if I set the boundary and say, please, moving forward, every time we record in here together, brush your teeth before you come in.
Yes.
You'll come in after brushing your teeth. And I say, yes, let's record.
Yeah. And then you'll be happier. And then frankly, because I care about your experience and I care about you, then I'm going to be happier too, because then I get to be in a relationship with the real Marissa. I get to be in a relationship with the Marissa who's comfortable and happy and feels good and is invested in the relationship, instead of the Marissa that's sitting there sort of gently holding her hand over her nose as she asks me questions, trying to avoid my breath. Again, I'm sure there's more elegant examples than the breath, but I think that sort of encapsulates it.
Mm-hmm. Other thoughts? I'm curious, either your experience working with people or working with families dealing with addiction, boundaries potentially with other family members.
Mm-hmm.
What do those look like?
Boundaries with other family members. Well, I mean, I think working with individuals, you really have to get to the place where you hear them and where they know that you hear them. Because again, a lot of times people start out egocentric and they're going to want to hear that it's the other person's problem. And I know you work with codependents. I'm sure you have worked with plenty of people where they come in to talk about the other person's problem. And what we have to do is we have to build rapport and build trust. And then eventually we have to start getting them to look inward. Right. And then once they're able to understand that the good news and the bad news is that their happiness is up to them, then we start to work on, okay, so what are your needs? How are they not getting met? And then what are the rules we'd be breaking by talking about that? How can we reframe boundaries to saying yes instead of saying no? And it's a really long and delicate process because, again, like I said, it's existential and it really strikes to people's core. And you can't skip the first steps. You can't skip the rapport building. You can't skip the trust building, because one of the big problems that these people feel is no one understands me. And so until you are on their side or they think you're on their side, you can't be the voice that speaks out against it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you can start to, then you start to assess the person's needs and you can start to build from there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, did I answer the question? I'm doing a bad job at tracking questions today.
No, I think you're painting the road towards boundaries or creating them. And also, I think one thing that I've experienced in my own life is that I might start to set boundaries within those relationships that are it's most obvious I need to set boundaries, right? So if I was, if I had a loved one who's an alcoholic, going to therapy, I probably would start with that person. Mm-hmm. But then I might start coming to therapy and I'll start complaining about my sisters, or I'll start complaining about, if we're doing a typical, my dad's an alcoholic, then I'll start complaining how my mom has been calling me every day and talking my ear off for an hour, but I have no awareness, Nick,
Mhm.
that I can say, Mom, I have 15 minutes. And so, yeah, like your thoughts on like how like you're able usually to like start setting boundaries. Yeah, like the most obvious ones, but then it's like whack-a-mole. All these other issues come up. Like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, so the first thing is you have to get people comfortable with the fact that the first time they set a boundary, it's most often gonna feel like they are punching somebody in the face. It feels so aggressive for codependent people to set boundaries that they're gonna feel like they are breaking a huge rule and they're being terribly shitty.
Right.
And the truth is that in most of these instances, the boundary is going to be very, very slight because it's their first attempt. And the other person very often, unless they're really deeply dysfunctional, is not going to be terribly offended by that. Or occasionally they overcorrect and they set a super rigid boundary. But hopefully if we're working together in therapy, they don't start with that like you have to stop everything, damn it, that sort of temper tantrum rigid boundary.
Right.
And then the second thing is really helping with the reframe of people understanding that boundaries are good for both parties. It's not a selfish act. It's actually kind of a gift to the person that you're setting the boundary with, because then they get the real you, they get the authentic you, right? And then so it's helping people understand those things. And then it's really validating and normalizing them getting their needs met. Hey, listen, you deserve to have your needs met too in this relationship. That doesn't mean they have to say yes, but you have the right to ask. And you have the right to insist that in order to be in relationship with you, they have to meet certain requirements, because it is conditional. Excuse me. And it's conditional because you're meeting all of these conditions that no one has ever asked you to meet all the time. And now it's time for you to get, one little thing met.
Right.
And then it's astonishing. People can feel really powerful once they have a little bit of success with that. And frankly, a couple of things tend to happen, and I'm speaking pretty broadly here, but this is sort of generally true, is that either your relationships get way stronger, because then suddenly you want to be there with the person more because you're getting to be your real self, and because the person's meeting your needs more. And so like if the person rises to the occasion, rises to the boundary, then the relationship can get so much deeper and so much better and so much more satisfying. The other thing that sometimes happens is sometimes the person fucks off. So you might say, Marissa, you might say, Nick, look, I appreciate you. I love doing this podcast with you. You got to brush your teeth before you come in here. And then I might say, really? Well, you know what? Maybe you're just acting like an asshole, and maybe I don't need to deal with this anymore. Now,
Right.
if that's my response to, hey, your breath is a little offensive and I need you to brush your teeth, then yeah, you and I aren't going to be in a relationship anymore. And that's actually good for you, painful though it would be.
Yeah.
Because that's really speaking to my dysfunction, not to you. Right. And so that's the thing that people need to be prepared for, is that it's not a risk-free environment. But the result is the pretty dysfunctional relationships are often going to go away. And then we grieve that. And the really healthy relationships, the progressing relationships, will grow and flourish and blossom beyond what the codependent thinks is possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we've started to answer this one already, but I am curious, like, yeah, if you have any other thoughts on what about learning to set boundaries in these families is so painful, right? You talked about how it's hard, how it's punching someone in the face. We've touched on like the existential aspect. Other thoughts on like why it's often so painful to set boundaries.
I'll add one more thing to the list, which is that it feels like something that will never work. And so it feels like jeopardizing an entire relationship in the service of something that will never work, because people are not used to having their needs met. They're not used to having boundaries work. Maybe they tried early on to set boundaries and those were rebuffed. And so if you say, yeah, you got to set a boundary with that guy, a lot of times the thing is going to be, well, that's never going to happen. That's never going to work. And then it's doubly hard because one thing codependents don't want to do is disrupt the relationship. And so if I say, look, I want you to disrupt the relationship by telling this guy, I would be less directive than this, but like if the subtext is, I want you to disrupt this relationship by telling this guy to brush his teeth, then it's going to feel like, well, number one, he's never going to brush his teeth, because if he knew to do that, he would already be doing it. He wouldn't be showing up to my studio that way. You know what I mean? He's choosing this, and I don't know why he's choosing this, but that's how it is. And the second thing is he's going to tell me to fuck myself. And that's going to be really, really, really painful. And then I'm going to lose my friendship, and I'm going to lose, you know, I don't know, whatever else is that you stand to lose in the relationship, pickleball opponent, hopefully one day. And so that feels super high risk to them. So I think it's just like adding the notion that it can work and what that looks like.
Right. Yeah. You're reminding me again, like, one of my like most obvious codependent relationships with an ex-boyfriend. We were together at the time. I've shared about him a lot on this podcast, but he would not stop talking to his ex-girlfriend. He wouldn't do it. He'd start, right? You know, we'd have a talk. And I remember I'd go to therapy and talk to my therapist about it and get all empowered. And then I'd like write him a note or a letter, and I'd be like, you need to stop. Right. I needed the letter. I needed to be bolstered, like with affirmation and validation by my therapist. I think, you know, there was some accountability with my therapist, just like, you know, like I'm like crying like for how many weeks, and it's finally like, okay, I'll talk to him. And then probably like a month went by, like of more sessions, but yeah, like just like, okay, like Marissa, you can do this. And yeah, we had that talk multiple times, and multiple times I would find out, right? Some text or call or Instagram DM, something. And
how deep were you on this guy's phone?
Oh, well, that's the thing too. Like I was totally like an FBI detective, and he didn't know it. Yeah.
Right
yeah.
on. Okay.
Although
it sounds like he didn't deserve your trust, so it's tough when you're right. It's tough to get in the way of somebody invading somebody's privacy when they're correct, when their suspicions are correct. Right?
Yeah, it's terrible. But you know, like you said, like ultimately, yeah, I think like finally, I like really stuck my foot in the ground. And I was like, this is it. Like this is the limit. And yeah, like the rule was don't disrupt, but yeah, it's not a no risk environment, but ultimately that relationship ended. Like you said, there was grief. There was reflection. I had to date someone just like him one more time.
Sure.
But then, yeah, like eventually, like I don't attract that person anymore. Yeah. I didn't marry someone with that makeup. So there is hope, but yeah, it was and is, like thinking about it, like I was just so little and scared, and I just felt so puny.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it is scary, and it's high stakes, and it's tough, and it's less comfortable. I mean, it's one of the things is that when you've grown up your whole life being codependent, it's easy to be codependent, and it is a very well-trodden set of rules. And it's tough because, you know, it's harder to show up in a boundaried way for codependence than it is to show up with no boundaries. And yet here in your experience, you know, you dealt with this guy and one more after him, and you learned to set boundaries, and then you started dating in the big leagues.
Right.
How fucking cool is that? Right.
Right. Yeah. Oh, the coolest. Yeah. Thank God. Thank God. All right. So with your clients, how do you help them navigate this pain and ultimately set boundaries? And do they live happily ever after?
I don't bullshit them that there is pain there. And I think that's a big thing, is that I understand. I think one of the things that is helpful in my therapy is that I understand that it is scary and hard, and that it takes time for people to work up the courage to do that. I don't bullshit people about like, oh, it's sunshine and roses on the other side, or, oh, this will be so easy. You'll have this conversation. It'll be so easy. It seems like it's going to be hard. Nope. It's going to be very hard. Do they live happily ever after? I hope so. You know, like all therapists, whether they tell you or not, sometimes I have really positive outcomes and sometimes I don't have positive outcomes. And so I've had clients where they have learned to set boundaries, and then the partner rises to the occasion. And then suddenly they have this incredibly healthy, vibrant relationship where people are getting their needs met and they're fucking stoked. And I have had those outcomes. And then I've had outcomes where I've worked with people and they just can't get over the hump. And whether that's about my skill as a clinician or whether that's about their readiness, I couldn't tell you. It's probably a little from column A and a little from column B.
Right.
But yeah, some people don't. And the bummer of it is that with most of us, and I don't just restrict this to people in treatment, I think all over the world. One of the sad things is that when it doesn't work or when people never get over that hump, a lot of times they're just baffled for the rest of their life as to why. And that's to me is the sad part, is it's like, it's such a mind fuck. And that like the real problem was either that, he just didn't know how much I loved him, or there was something about me that was not good enough or lovable enough for him to be with me. Right. Those are really painful lessons to learn, and they're not generally really true. But I think that's what people walk away with. I'm thinking of one client in particular where we didn't end up getting over the hump, and I appreciated this person. They appreciated me. I'm glad we worked together, but they left treatment ultimately with the decision that I can and won't set relationships with my partner. It's just not going to work. I'm just going to keep going this path until the partner understands how important I am to them and understands that they need to be better to me. I still get sad thinking about it because, it didn't happen in the years that we worked together. Right. But the person just couldn't get their mind around the fact that they needed to change, and that it wasn't that the other person might change or might not, but that it wasn't up to them, and that the client's satisfaction was not up to the other person. The client desperately wanted the satisfaction to be up to the other person. And it's a shame, because it'd be great if that other person played along, but it's a real loser of a bet to bet on somebody else and I don't mean that loser's a word I want to use sparingly. It's not, the person's not a loser, but like it is a losing bet to rely on other people for your satisfaction.
Right. And then I think just like wrapping this up in a nice little bow, right? Talking about this client, you said that they couldn't wrap their mind around the fact, I'm botching this, but like that it wasn't up to them to convince someone to change.
Right.
Right. But big picture, they couldn't like break from their addicted family rule pattern.
Yeah.
Right.
They wanted to take care of this person all the time. They liked that. Yeah. They liked the caretaking. They liked being the person that caretook. That's another thing, is that can be kind of addictive. And then they wanted so badly for this other partner to take care of them in that way. And that can happen. It didn't happen in this instance. Then that's real enmeshment, right? Real enmeshment is when, just two people are so up in each other's business that every little wave affects both of them dramatically, right? But this person's partner was never going to be that partner. This person's partner was frankly kind of a user. And the result was this client was just doomed until hopefully one day they made a different decision to have a partner that they were always going to feel didn't show up enough, and they're always going to feel needed to do more, and was in terrible betraying breach of a code by not showing up for the client in the way the client wanted.
Right. Yeah. I think I easily could have been them, right? Sure. Like not breaking like different, like patterns in addicted families.
Yes.
So it's so hard to reprogram all the programming. Right.
It's brutal. And yet the thing I would say, if there's anybody, is this podcast for clinicians, or is it for lay people, or both, or like?
I would say both.
Both. Okay.
I get a lot of listeners who are like, my therapist told me to listen to it.
Oh, so. I like that. So then I would say that, for you lay people out there, I would say there really is hope. It really can be better. And the good and the bad news is that it starts with you. And that's really hard. And if your therapist is in there, oh no, I'm getting a no. Is that not a message we share in this podcast?
No, it is. It's just like internally, it's like, no, like I don't want it.
Yeah, because it's so painful. But the good news is if you can get over that hump of change starts with me, and it's up to me to be in charge of my happiness, then you would be astonished at how wonderful the world can be and how functional your relationships can get.
Amen.
Amen.
All right, Nick. Well, thank you so much for coming back. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, like I said, everyone, this is Nick's second interview. So I'll put links to his first one for you to listen to as well. And if people want to find out more about you, where can they go?
So all you lay people out there can visit nickbognartherapy.com, which is my therapist website, where I talk about the men's issues and codependents that I work with. I do enjoy working with people of all genders, but I have a specialty with men's issues. Clinicians out there who want to learn how to build their caseloads can visit actionpracticebuilding.com. And folks who want to see my film work can go to IMDb and search Ryan Gosling, which is, again, my stage name. And I think if you haven't seen my body of work, you'll be very pleased with my output.
Thank you. All right. I will put links to all of that in the show notes. And again, thank you for coming back. This was lovely.
Yeah. Listen, I'll do this podcast every week if it means I get to chill with you. When am I getting? All right. Now I'm going to put you on the spot on your podcast. Oh. When are we going to get on the pickleball court? Because you've been dangling that in front of me for years at this point.
So everyone, I play pickleball randomly. You know, we haven't really played this summer. My family as a unit, we haven't been playing. We've taken a pickleball pause. My parents are still obsessed, but I feel like it was a very COVID friendly activity. And so I would say from last summer to this summer, I have family in town, and I feel like that's what we did the last time they were here, and we haven't played the whole time they've been visiting. So
I'm going to pull a talented Mr. Ripley on you, and I'm going to go to Claremont, and I'm going to go find your folks at the pickleball courts, and I'm going to befriend them. And then they're going to be like, Marissa, you've got to come out and be our fourth. We met this incredible guy. His name's Ryan, at the courts. Have you heard of Ryan Gosling? He's a great pickleball player. He's like a solid 3-5. And then you're going to be like, yeah, let's go play with him. And then I'm going to show up and you're going to be horrified, but I won't kill you in a boat.
Sounds good. Alert. Sounds good. Yeah, we had one failed pickleball game, Nick and I, but there was a kids' soccer tournament on pickleball courts. That was terrible. Yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for being here. Thank you, dear listener, for being here. And hope you guys all have a good week. I will see you next week. Take good care. Hey, girl. It's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster. I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please find one.